Our world continues to change and push us in ways we have not been challenged before. On this show, we talk about these challenges, how to be aware of them, face them, and overcome them in your life. This is David Waldas, creator of the Aligned Living System.
And I'm Nick Musica, Aligned Living Coach. Welcome to the Aligned Living System podcast.
Welcome to the Aligned Living System podcast. This is David Waldas here with Nick Musica. And this week we're going to talk about what it means to live in the heart. And, I'll start that out by just saying I think it can mean a lot of different things. And part of really getting clear on what that looks like for us is about recognizing where we're at now. Like for some people, living in the heart may just be being a little more heart-centered in their thinking. For other people, it may be just being this beautiful expansion of love. And when we try to kind of bring the highest version of that rather than the one that matches where we're at, it usually gets very, very messy for us energetically and emotionally. And so I think it'll be kind of an interesting conversation because so many people just say, I really want to be in my heart, but they don't know how to organize their energy so they're not absorbing everybody else's stuff. And they just open up and then they just end up with a whole bunch of narcissistic behavior around them, taking advantage of them, taking advantage of their, offering their, the beautiful energy that's coming out of them just gets consumed by, narcissistic, the word predators coming into, people that are looking for somebody to take advantage of like that. And that kind of living in the heart just costs us, so intensely. And so, the response is often to just shut down, to withdraw, to lose trust, to feel like, you can't trust this world or the people in it. And we'll talk a little bit about the nuances of that versus the idea of this swinging between, oh my God, it feels so good to be wide open, to, oh my God, people are mistreating me. I got to shut down and protect and retreat. And that's part of the empathic thing that people tend to do. And so we'll break it down a little bit more and think and really get clear on how we run our energy, what it means that's appropriate for us, that is sustainable for opening our hearts, and then the different containers where we may fluctuate that depending on who we're around and what their energy's like and what their intentions are. And so a little bit of a frame up there. This should be an interesting conversation. Yeah. How you doing this morning, Nick?
I'm doing great. Good morning, David.
Yeah. Good to connect. So, I think most of us tend to be pretty guarded, right? With, our hearts and how we connect with other people and how we connect with the world. And, we've been trained to be that way because, this idea that you go out in the world, people don't have your best interest in mind.
Yeah.
And, if you're too wide open, like we all can probably think of a couple of people in our lives right now, maybe it's ourselves that have just gone out into the world and be like, oh, I just see beauty everywhere. And I just want to open up my heart and be loving and think that that's going to create these beautiful things. But that's also the same person who's in a puddle at the end of the day, crying and feeling mistreated and, in the victimhood and all that, because that's what it creates. And so what does it look like to, organize our energy in a way where we can be open-hearted, but not be this calling card for predatory, narcissistic people that want to just feed off that and mistreat us?
Yeah. I mean, there seems to be an aspect of discernment in how that's expressed.
Absolutely, too. And the discernment in a couple ways is one, how do we structure it? And the other is, who are we opening up to?
Yeah, right.
And, I always joke when people go like, oh my God, it feels like everybody around me is just taking from me. Like, well, what's your intention? Well, I love to give. Like, okay, well, when we love to give and our whole intention is to give, what do we get? Takers, but
Yeah.
if our intention is to give and receive, takers aren't what show up because they're not interested in that reciprocal experience and that reciprocal behavior. And, it may feel like a weird thing, like, how do I open my heart? Well, I have to really open it up with an intention of also of receiving.
Yeah.
And if I just open it with this intention of giving, and it's going to be counterintuitive, and this may trigger people and make people go, oh, whatever, but it's about feedback loops. And when we just put out into the world, maybe we've probably maybe experienced it financially, where people that are really focused on, I want to make sure I'm paid well for what I do. It happens when people go, I just want to give my offerings,
Mhm.
and they're like, I'm broke again. Like, well, of course you are, because there's no completing of that feedback loop. And that's the same with loving energy. It's the same with financial. It's the same with support. Whatever we're talking about, if we don't structure ourselves in an intentionality, which is usually overriding our childhood training, because people don't go, okay, I'm going to train you how to give me love, but I'm also going to train you how to receive love. There's usually
Mm.
some sort of lopsidedness. Maybe we got trained to just receive it and not give it. Um, and so whatever our training is, it tends to be how we naturally replicate our field. And so bring it back home again and going, okay, that classic empath feedback loop is I walk out into the world comes at me, I feel all of it and I respond. And the more open-hearted I am, the more I feel and the more my response is.
Right.
And so, with the aligned living work, we reverse that feedback loop. We get in touch with ourselves, feel the energy that's leaving us, tap into our highest aspect of self, bring that to the world and radiate that out. And so the next level of that then is, what is the energy that we're wanting to tap into to come back to us? And again, whole menu, right? Like if you want a narcissist, right there. If you want somebody who's loving and supportive, right there.
Yeah.
And so all that's available. And so our frequency, the kind of the key and the locks that fit together are really going to be, that resonance is going to be based a lot of on our intention. And if we don't get intentional about it, it just defaults to our childhood experience. And we end up recreating it because that's the program, that's the structure that's already running through us.
Yeah. Yeah. Nice. So I'm hearing intentional and implicitly action associated with that. Right. Like
Yeah, yeah,
the
yeah.
willingness of receiving, which is sometimes energetic and sometimes is really like physical. Like I'll
Yeah,
pick up the thing or whatever it may be.
yeah, I'll make the call. Yeah,
Right.
or I'll refrain from the overgiving, or I'll refrain, like
Right.
whatever that is. And so there's a physical action oriented component to it. There's an emotional component to it. There's a mental component, and there's an energetic component to it.
Mm.
And when we're aware of all of those components and intentional about it, and people say, well, what happens when people, how many people have done this? Like I think about when I was a teacher and I was like, oh my God, I'm so tired of being broke. I want to make money. I'm going to shift from being so focused on giving to focus on, like, I'm going to go back to sales. I'm going to make a ton of money again. That's what I want to do. Like that swing versus, how about if I just put both out? I love to give and I love to
Mm.
receive, and that abundance is available to me, and that abundance of giving is available to me. And when I'm running
Yeah.
both those energies, then the synchronicities happen and it matches up. But here's the interesting thing about it: if we're just stuck in our third dimensional self, we tend to get really lopsided. We tend to get in that duality, thinking one or the other. But when we move into this higher aspect of ourselves, which this work is all about, our imagination, that is kind of what we're talking about when we think about our energy, our emotions, and our thinking, when we're in our imagination with it. And when our
Hmm.
imagination, when we're there and we're in a higher dimensional state, it becomes our control panel. It becomes this frequency, and it's true somewhat at a third dimensional reality, at a denser reality, but it magnifies just exponentially when we bring ourselves into higher states of consciousness. And so when we put that out into the world, and we're intentional about it, that's like it just becomes this creation machine. And it
Yeah.
already is. It's usually just a default creation machine to, like, this reminds me of my childhood. Well, no shit, right? Like, of course it does, because that's what our default setting is. That's what our autopilot is. And so it's funny, years ago I did a workshop I called the autopilot overhaul, which was about resetting our autopilot. And that's really what we're doing. um, and so that, to me, is so, like, when people start to get that and go, oh my gosh, like I can feel my desire to give, but I don't feel my desire to receive. I know it is victimhood, but victimhood is not a desire to receive. That's an aftertaste of not receiving.
Hmm.
And having to sort through that, and get really clear with ourselves, particularly I think so often in spiritual religious circles, the idea of wanting something in return, um, has a negative connotation, versus the idea of, like, well, if I'm creating this, why would I create all this giving without it coming back to me? in a positive way rather than in a resentful way.
Hmm. Hmm. So it seems like what may be a helpful tool for folks to just get a baseline is on a scale of 1 to 10, how would you describe, 1 being almost nothing and 10 being maximum? How would you describe your giving? And
Hmm.
then do the same thing receiving and see
Yes.
where that number falls, right? So
Yeah, absolutely.
if it's a 10 and a 1, well, that seems a little off balance by 9
Right,
points.
right. Yeah, and
But if
I think, oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
but if it's a 5 and a 5 or a 6 and a 6, a 1 and a 1, it sort of almost doesn't matter because it's a one-to-one
It
relationship in a
balances
way.
itself, right? Yeah,
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 right, right,
yeah. And then we can raise that. And I think
right.
too, being really intentional of like, am I categorizing it? Like if we have a tendency towards victimhood, we may categorize the receiving, in the areas where we're not receiving so much. So maybe like there's a lot of financial receiving, but not a lot of love
Mm,
receiving, or maybe there's a
mm,
lot of support, but not appreciation. Maybe, however that plays out to us, can we look at the categories and say, this is where I actually have this figured out. There's an abundance coming in and going out, or it's lopsided, so I need to look at it. But there's also other areas maybe where I need to rebalance it a little bit more.
yeah, right,
And
right, right.
um, and so like it all starts with being in our alignment and the intentionality of that, and tracking that feedback. And so with aligned living, we talk about really focusing on how does it feel when this leaves my body? How does it feel when I open up and let this beautiful heart energy leave? And keeping the awareness on ourselves, but the intention also for it to come back, not tracking it out there, not going, oh, how are they responding, but the intention that it comes back. Does that make sense, that difference? Because we often want to go send it out and go, okay, how did they do it? Are they going to love me back? Are they going to appreciate me?
Yeah, yeah,
Are they going to, or are they just, oh, nope, they're using me. That's, here I am again.
right, right. Yeah, I mean
Versus,
it's really like putting outcomes to the side for a while because they don't matter, and making sure that the intention and the action is there, and then the outcomes eventually follow.
yeah, then watching does it fill in, right? And
Right,
that's how
right.
we know, like, is my intention really to receive, as much as I'm giving, or am I still holding some of that childhood, programming,
Right.
victimhood? And what I think what's so fun about this work, and I see it with clients so much, is when they recognize that there's a game here. And it's
Mm,
not just this is the way the world treats me. It's like, man, when I get intentional, I'm creating my reality. And there is
yeah,
no doubt about it because I see the
absolutely.
evidence over and over again.
Yeah,
There's no doubt.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Um, really, really fascinating. And so, where to start with this? I think what Nick just said, like that inventory is fantastic. And maybe even break it down to a few categories. Are there categories where you're really good at receiving? And then look, oh, that's interesting. I did get that in my childhood. Are there areas where you're really not good at receiving? Oh, interesting. I didn't get a
Yeah.
lot of that in my childhood. Well, yeah, there we go. There's our program. There's our energetic structure that tells the world how to treat us.
So can we break down a few categories for folks again? Let's just repeat
Sure.
them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, so finance would be one.
Yeah. Yeah.
Relationship, it
Yeah.
maybe, and that's broad because
Yeah.
there's
And
multiple
it could
types.
be, intimate relationship could be
Yep.
one. Friendships could be another.
Yep.
Then male, female, like then age too, like, are younger, my relationship with younger people, are they better, or my
Mm.
relationship with older people better?
Oh,
And,
interesting.
and so we can see, and then you'll see a reflection of your childhood. Like grandma was great to me, mom wasn't. Okay. Oh, it's amazing how I meet all these older women who are so supportive and loving. But when I meet, you know, women that are not as old, like they just don't seem to. Or maybe I had a sister, or my first relationships with intimate partners or boyfriend girlfriend, like where when we create those programs, like
Yeah.
they they become a story, literally like a program. And
Yeah.
it's press play on tape. This is what happens. This is what our energy creates. And how exciting that is when we start to go, well, shit, like when I move into this higher state of consciousness, and when I move into my alignment, my imagination becomes my control panel, and I can start to turn these dials and get almost immediate results.
Yeah. 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 So I'm wondering now. We've talked about the Harrison more than once on the show, but
Yeah.
it's essentially behavioral assessment tool, and part of it is when there's two characteristics that are out of balance. Instead of saying this is way too much, reel it in. The focus is, so the one that's a little lower, we want to focus on bringing that one up, and naturally the other one sort of comes back into balance. Would you agree that if you're over giving, the tactic should not be to reduce the giving, but to increase the receiving?
Yeah, absolutely. And so say, I mean, here's the thing about the Harrison too. Say you get a 10 on it, which is the highest. That's almost impulsive behavior. Like you don't
Yeah.
feel choice in it. You just
Yeah.
do it, do it, do it. And so if it's like that impulsive level, then maybe back it off a little bit. But if it's not this impulsive level where you can't help yourself, then absolutely it's always going to be about raising, the receiving in this case.
Right.
But even like a 10 to 10 can work really well, like impulsive receiving, impulsive giving. But
Yeah.
it's kind of a funny thing about those scales. Like when they get up to the upper edge of things, like they have to be completely imbalanced because it's so impulsive, compulsive even. But yeah, to simplify that,
Mhm.
absolutely. Um, the idea of like, yeah, don't go, oh, I'm so tired of people taking from me, I'm going to stop giving. Like open your receiving and it'll come into balance.
Mhm.
And all of a sudden, like you love giving, that's why you're doing it. But the well gets dry when you're giving and not receiving. And
Right.
so, this allowing that to balance out. And so, the topic we started out with is about how to be open-hearted, and how to live. And it starts with that balance, because if we don't have that balance, it gets lopsided fast. We become a victim. We can become exhausted. We become, you know, uh, negative, like pessimistic about things. Um, and also like when we are open-hearted and we're really intentional about where that energy goes, and we create the containers for the people that we've called in, through our intention of receiving, that can give at the same level that we're receiving, like beautiful things happen. But we also can't go into a room full of takers and go, I'm open to receiving, but I'm putting myself in a situation where it's not going to happen. Like that's the third dimensional component of it too. Is like, sure, you can call in different aspects of people, but it's not going to be completely, where it corrects itself, because you're in a relationship with a narcissist, and now that you set the intention out, basically what'll happen is you'll probably end up becoming less interesting to them and more
Yeah.
interesting to other people. And sure, their
Yeah.
behavior may change some, but that's not
Yeah.
what they're looking for. They haven't, they want to take and don't want to have to give in the same level.
Yeah. I mean, it's crazy when it does show up. I'm working with a young lady now who is is uh is an overgiver in some
Yeah,
ways,
yeah,
and she's changing what she does for a living, and things are showing up for her. Like just
yeah,
magical support is showing up for her, and like the
yeah.
yeses are starting to stack up,
Right, right.
and it's surprising. Like
And it feels like magic, right?
yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah, and it's a couple things. One is the overgiving, and then alignment with what she's doing. Like the
Mm-hmm.
overgiving is sort of mapping into her benefit, and but then because of that alignment, like there's this receiving that's showing up,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
and if you're not used to it, if you're just used for the overgiving, you like it sort of can knock you off balance a little bit. You recognize that that receiving is happening, and you sort of have to adjust your reality to the receiving of it all, and
yeah,
then just
yeah,
and
yeah.
find your balance again.
Yeah, it's funny as you were saying that too. It made me think about in my book, there's a chapter called The Dangers of Magical Thinking. And
Mm,
it was based on conversations that you and I had in your sessions when we first started working together, was what I used as the examples in it. And how fun is that? Because like it's based on the idea of like, if we don't recognize that the things that we're doing are creating the changes, that it's not magic, that it's not
right,
like we didn't
right,
just, the guys didn't just come down and bless us and now things are different. Like we're running a different energetic structure, and it's our responsibility. And sure, there is all this support, absolutely, but we're also supported in being who we are and what we're doing and getting the lessons in order to change that. It's not going, oh, please, guides and angels, bring, loving people into my life. Like, maybe what'll happen is a whole bunch of narcissistic people will show up because we have to learn how to restructure
right,
our giving and receiving. They teach us how to be responsible for self, not how to ask for help and then just sit here and act the same way and expect different results.
right, Right. Yeah. You just don't, if you have a out of balance relationship with money, you just don't go, man, I could really use a bucket of money just to land in my lap right now. It's like, well, I mean, most people don't win the lottery. If you do great, good for you.
Yeah,
And a lot of those people go broke after they win it for
100%.
reasons.
That's what I was about to say, right? Because they didn't change anything. Like, oh, great, here's your money. Oh, and now it's gone again. More suffering, more pain.
Right. Right.
Versus, are you going to learn how to hold this? Are you going to learn how to take care of
That's right.
yourself in a way that money can stick around in your life?
Yeah.
And so that open-heartedness, it's not just opening our heart. It's about getting really clear on who we're opening up to, what we're opening up to. Yes, how does it feel as it leaves? But what are my intentions about
Yeah.
what's coming back? Because if I'm not open to being taken advantage of, those people will find me very uninteresting.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds like there's this judge that shows up in my feed every once in a while. He's on the bench and people show up in really, difficult situations. I walked here because I lost my license, or I sold,
Yeah.
or I had to sell my car, whatever it is, and they owe $100 and they don't have $1 in the bank,
Yeah.
and the judge hears them out, and the law says I can throw you in jail, and he's just
Yeah.
like, you know what, come back in 3 months and we'll figure it out.
Yeah.
And so there's this
Go make some
judgment.
changes.
Yeah, go make some changes. Like, and I'm going to support you where you are here. But really, there's this person over here, like figuring out the situation so that they get the best, so we can all get the best result from it. It's a different way of behaving versus just slamming the gavel down and going, here's the sentence.
Yeah.
Which
This is what you get, this is what you deserve. Yeah.
Right, which is sort of that compulsion of, but this is how I operate. Like, well, the law says you should go to jail for 3 months, so we're going to put you in jail for 3 months. No, there's you can operate in a variety of ways to get a different result, and be surprised that you do get a different result.
Yeah. Yeah. So really interesting conversation, right? And this, in this 25-minute podcast, or however long we're talking here, it's it's hard to land all of it, but I think the idea, the concept of it, is so powerful. And once we start to tap into that, changes do happen. And so, obviously we have all these free resources as well as opportunities to work with us. If you're seeing these patterns in your life, like, we're here to help you make changes. And, we've seen it in our own lives. This isn't something that we're like, oh, well, I've already figured this out, and so now I can help. Like it's been a journey for us figuring out how to balance these things in our lives. And, like any human, we have moments where it's much more balanced for us. But when it's out of balance, we go, look at how I created this. These are the things I did. I can see how I was working with my control panel to turn the knobs that open this up. And now I'm going to readjust. Now I'm going to realign. And the more we do this work, the better we get at recognizing it, realigning, and righting the ship and pulling things in. And so, yeah, we love supporting people to learn how to right their ship, to see how powerful that control panel is, and how almost, instantaneous it really is. And the miracles, the magic, which is not magic, it's synchronicity and resonance and all of that. It just happens in our lives. And so, check out the resources. We'd love to support you and love to hear your feedback. So thanks so much for listening. This feels like a topic we could probably get back into again, because there's so much there.
Much more.
Yeah, well, have a great week, everyone.
Thanks, folks.
We hope you enjoyed listening to today's podcast. And if you did, please subscribe so you can catch the next episode. If you want to learn more about the Aligned Living System and how it could support you in your life, check out davidwaldas.com.